I'm going to share something with you today that blew my mind. I mean, okay, there are levels to things, and sometimes it cracks me up, but it is so fascinating as I go through this journey of learning more about myself and why I do the things I do or don't do the things that I don't do. It is wild sometimes. So the story starts with this. My son sent me a text about a week and a half ago. And in our chats back and forth, he also sent a link to an article that he thought would be interesting to me. And anyway, I was busy at the moment, or so I told myself, whatever. Anyway, time went on. So here it is this morning, a week and a half later, and I still haven't clicked on that link to see what it was. And so I thought, boy, I don't want time to go on where I just forget about this and it just falls away. What's actually going on here? Because when I just am still and think about it, there was some resistance about opening this email. And so I thought, what is it? Is it the email? Or not the email, but the link. So anyway, so I went to open it up and I was like, it's on my phone. I don't want to read the small text. So I'll copy and paste the link. I'll email it to myself and I'll open up on my computer and read it on the big screen. So I did that. And when I got to the end of it, my brain was kind of going in the background. I got to the end of it and I started just laughing to myself because once I asked about what's the resistance here, my mind started working on it and worked around it and found the obstacle and went around it. The obstacle was this. It was a link to an article that if I opened it up on my phone would be small print. And I don't want to read a bunch of small print on my phone. I don't really want to have to pull out my reading glasses to read it because that's a bother and I've got issues with that too. So simple solution was what I just did, brought it to a big screen where I could read it on a bigger screen. But for a week and a half, as it came to mind, I resisted it. And so it just kind of kept getting put back on the pile of I'll do this later. And I didn't want it to be something where I did that long enough to where it just went onto a stack of I'll do it laters and created a pile, because those piles I've learned about myself kind of take on a life of their own, where it's a whole bunch of stuff that I need to attend to, and whatever the situations are behind them, all that whole stack of things, and that becomes a big chore in my head, which is a whole nother story. But the thing is that there was resistance, and I hadn't until a week and a half later got myself to a still spot and put some brain on it and thought consciously, there's resistance here. What is it and why? And so the resistance was just that. It was just that I didn't want to open up a little screen on my phone. I wanted to be able to read it on something bigger, and it meant these couple of steps to do it, or use my reading glasses. But sometimes, when you're reading this article on your phone, you have to move it around to keep reading it because it doesn't always this size right and all that stuff. And I didn't know if that was the fact or not. I was assuming it probably would be, because there was also resistance about my reading glasses, and I'll get to that in a second. But the biggest thing was that a week and a half went by on this thing that I wanted to read, and my son doesn't just send me a bunch of unwanted stuff to go through. This was something I wanted to read, I was interested in, and I hadn't looked at it to see why I wasn't doing it. What was the resistance? And so when I did, it was simple, right? Just send it to something bigger. I could have cast it to the TV or cast it to my computer or whatever, but whatever it was, send it to something bigger. And so I don't have that obstacle in front of me anymore. So I did, I read it, it was a good article and helpful, and I told him so. And it's crazy because it wasn't like every day, every hour I was putting this thing off for a week and a half. It was just as it came to mind periodically, I did. And I had other things going on, and I kind of chalked it up to being busy or being too tired or just whatever, but I knew deep down inside there was something else. And so when I actually sat still in a quiet spot in my head, a quiet environment where there weren't distractions, and put some brain on it and asked myself, okay, what is the resistance here? Because there is resistance. What is it? When I did so, the answer became clear. And it was so simple, easy to get around. mission accomplished, everything's done. And it was laughable because that simple little step took me a week and a half to get to. And how often does that happen to us in life? So anyway, that kind of blew my mind, and it was laughable because it was just like, this is silly, but how many times has this happened in my life and gotten to bigger and bigger degrees, or gotten to a thing where it finally gets put onto a pile or gets forgotten about, and then it's a whole different category of chore and things added on top of that. And I have had issues with that in my life and still struggle with it, but it's realizing things like this helps me to get to a spot where I can start to systemize and organize my life, my thinking, change my habits so that I don't create things that entrap me, ensnare me, cause obstacles that slog me down and cause life to be more complicated or full of resistance than I realized or want or need. And that is crazy awesome. Also mind-blowing. And then, this one really got me. Because I went through this whole thing, and off to the side was the whole idea of my reading glasses. I am now older in life, and I've been for, really 20 years where I started needing reading glasses on occasion. And as I get older, I need them on more occasions. Generally it's like things that are fairly close up, or if it's dim lighting. And that's to be expected, right? It's like as we get older, this sort of thing happens. Well, I've always had really good eyesight, so it just bugs the stew out of me that I have to use reading glasses. And part of me is like, this is part of being older, but also part of me is like, but I don't like it and I don't want it to be that way, right? And so there's this love-hate thing going on. And so after this whole email thing, I started thinking about my reading glass situation. It's like, okay, it's a love-hate, but there's resistance here, and there's something bigger than just reading glasses. I've got several reading glasses. I've got them in different bags. I've got them around the house. I've got them in the car so that if I need them, I've got them. And that's okay. I don't tend to wear them on my shirt or around my neck or anything like that, because that kind of gets in the way, or something I tell myself. But there is resistance. And what is the resistance? And the resistance on the reading glasses is, okay, it's inconvenient, sure, but it's also convenient when I actually put them on and I can read something, and that was not the big deal. There's always this thing, and the thing is that, all right, I'll start getting further in this, but this big thing that's right here that I want to point out is that it's all about stories. We attach stories to things. So my stories on the reading, I just told my story on the email. My story on the reading glasses is that it's a bother, right? It's inconvenient. And also my story is, daggone it, I don't want to be in a spot where I have to read things through reading glasses. I want my good eyesight back, right? But if I take that further on, there's another story on that, in that I want my youthful eyes back. Also, I want part of my youth back. I don't want to be an older person. I don't want to be old. I don't want to get old someday, right? And I'm in denial about that to a certain degree too. I consider myself older, not old. Although my teenage self or 20-year-old self would have said, "You're ancient, dude." Another story. But anyway, I've got this resistance about reading glasses because they represent accepting the fact that I'm getting older at least, getting older. Okay, we'll do this in stages. I'm not old yet, I'm not. But anyway, I resist the notion that I'm getting older. All right, so what? What is my story that creates resistance to getting older? Because there's layers, right? First layer is resistance to reading glasses. Why? Because it's a bother, because it represents getting older, okay? All right, what's my resistance to the bother part is not a big deal. I just have to work around the obstacles, have glasses all over the place, and that's okay. Resign myself to picking them up and using them. So that part is not so hard. But the deeper thing is my resistance to what? Getting older, to not being so youthful, to not having the attributes that I used to have when I was younger, where I didn't have to wear reading glasses. I could read something close up with itty bitty print on it in shadow and do that just fine. And now I got to turn on the floodlights and pull out the reading glasses. And every now and again, it's like, I need stronger reading glasses, and that is depressing. But there's resistance to that idea of getting old. And when I look at it a little bit more, okay, another layer here, so what? So what if I'm getting older, right? But here's the thing, as I started looking at that, it's like a lot of us really struggle with the notion of getting old, and we have troubles accepting it. And why? Because it means someday we're going to die. We are now more vulnerable than we used to be. And that sucks. I don't like that. I liked when I was young and felt invulnerable. I just felt like I could kind of do whatever and there would be, you know, no accidents, no death, no consequences. And I went through way too much of life kind of operating on that premise. And now it's confronting me tangibly where I have to deal with it on a regular basis. And I struggle with that because my story is I'm not old. My story is that being old is bad. Being old is vulnerable. Being old is being weak. Being old is, you know, all of these things and more. And so there's a whole batch of stories that I tell myself that causes resistance. And there's a part of our brain, I can't remember what it's called. I'll just call it the reticulum. That's not it though, I just know it, but it feels like it should be called that sometimes. But there's a part of our brain that constantly scans for threat. And whether it's real or perceived, is scanning for it and it acts on it. And part of me, the thought of me being old, that makes me vulnerable, that makes me potentially weak, that means I could die or break somehow. And that represents a threat to my manhood, a threat to my virility, a threat to my invulnerability. And while those are silly things in a way, they're also they're real. And we all deal with that, especially men, I think, but I don't think women are out of that either. The manhood part, maybe, but at any rate, it threatens. I could make a list and probably should of what it threatens. And sometimes it can be a matter of things that we want are being threatened. So I want to be able to be young. I want to have more years ahead of me to become more abundant, to do all these different things. I have my list of things I want to do. And so to admit that I might be old or getting old says that I might not be able to do all the stuff and have all the things and be all the things I wanted to be. And that sucks. And that is in the threat category. So the brain says, alert, alert. And so it puts up defenses of that. It makes resistance to that at the very least. And sometimes it puts us in a state where we are doing all kinds of things to represent that we're young and we're viral and we're still fully capable and able and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it is just the silliest nutso things. And I can think of examples of several people that I've known in my years that were well up in their 80s and 90s, which used to seem old and doesn't so much anymore, but where they were just kind of just at a state where they were just still fighting the fact that they were getting older and that they couldn't just leap out of a car or run or do the things they used to do or look as good as they used to or just whatever, all that kind of stuff that we kind of carry on that are avatars and tokens of what it is that we're fighting against or we see as threats or that we just don't want to face, that we're in denial about. And so for me, there's lots of layers of that. There's lots of things that being older represents that I don't like, I don't want to deal with, and I don't have to look at it as some big fatal thing. But I do need to recognize that there is sometimes resistance and sometimes layers and layers of it to different things. And one of them is getting older. One of them is that I have things that aren't 100% like they used to be. And that bothers me, and it bothers different sensitivities that I have. But you know what? That's all okay. And if I let it get in the way of me doing life, if I let it get in the way of me facing reality, and I try to just resist reality or just stubbornly get in this defensive, protective mode, then it's going to complicate my life and it's going to cause me to do things that I wouldn't otherwise do and say things that I wouldn't otherwise say and go down a path that the resistance, because it's kind of my mind telling me lies. You're not old, you're fully fit, you're fully capable, you can jump off of that railing, you could jump out of that window, whatever it is, and it's just not that it always is a matter of jumping, but as an example. I don't have impulses all day long to jump, just every now and again. But it's like we have these resistances to reality and these things that we're in denial about, these things that we have just a stubborn protective resistance to, and to understand what they are makes it so much easier to face it, to laugh about it, realize it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And getting older comes with its own advantages and benefits. And, you know, it's just, we got to embrace reality instead of denying it, instead of just pushing it off, instead of resisting it. And sometimes, boy, that can really, really, really complicate life. And we can spend years of our lives in this struggle for no reason. And we can endanger our lives, situations, all sorts of things, trying to fight this notion that we have, keep in our brain that I'm not young, daggone it. You know, wait, I'm not old, daggone it. Edit that out, fix that. Anyway, that I'm not old. And it's funny, that old thing is like a sliding scale. I'll talk about that some other time. But anyway, that was some processes that came to me today, and it was mind-blowing, and it really was eye-opening and helped me to realize that, man, just put a little brain on some things sometimes. Keep putting feelers out to, is there resistance here? If so, what's the resistance, or what are the different layers of resistance? Write it down if I have to so I can keep track of it, because sometimes it can be many different things. And once you know what the resistance is, like so many times, those things that are unknown, those little shapeless entities that we have in our head, those stories we tell ourselves, once we actually stand up and face it and name what it is, and it no longer has the same power over us, now we can maneuver through it and navigate our way through it. And always in retrospect, it's never the big deal that we think it is. And that's really cool. It is never as big a deal as we think it is, because the stories we tell ourselves, they are not based in reality, and they just get so convoluted and so escalated. And it is crazy what we do sometimes in our brains. And believe it, that's wild too. But anyway, there you have it. My mind was blown, and maybe this will help you to kind of look at some things in your life as I have done. These epiphany things we have, especially about our own lives and why we're doing things we're doing or what we're actually doing, is really wild, fascinating, I think. And I love it. It's, as I get past each one, it feels like this victory, right? And that is just really cool. So I'd be really curious, what have you encountered that has kind of blown your mind and helped you to face something that you're in denial or resisting about? You know, I continue to make this list as I go of things that I'm facing and resorting, and that's really cool. So anyway, let's open a dialogue, let's talk about it, because you know what? The more we realize that we're all in this together, we're all doing the same old thing, each other's perspectives and experiences can help each other, and I love that. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, share it with somebody you think might also enjoy it. Take a look at the next video, and we'll see you later. Have a great day.